Thank you for joining us. Today's webinar, Asset Liability Management, is presented by Tony Curry.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tony Curry, and I'm the Product Manager of Palms and Analytics at SS&C Technologies. Today's topics will cover asset liability management, interest rate risk, and the Palms solution and how it can address any of your needs, followed by a summary and closing thoughts. For the asset liability management component, we'll cover and touch upon the headline news, definition, role, goals, and risks of ALM. Then we'll also touch upon the interest rate risk, its importance, the four major components, as well as the major measurements of IRR. Recently, as you probably have heard in the newspapers around the country, there have been quite a bit of citations in terms of new regulatory guidance. At the end of March, we actually had an article come out at the Credit Union Times which stated the biggest dark cloud on the horizon is now interest rate risk. Then, earlier in the year, in January 6, 2010, there was another recent interagency statement. The Advisory on Interest Rate Risk Management stipulated that institutions are expected to have sound risk management practices in place to measure, monitor, and control IRR exposures. Importantly, effective IRR management not only involves the identification and measurement of IRR, but also provides the appropriate actions to control this risk. Then on March 17, 2010, the Funding and Liquidity Risk Management Guidance was issued. It stated, the process of measuring liquidity risk should include robust methods for comprehensively projecting cash flows arising from assets, liabilities, and off-balance sheet items over an appropriate set of time horizons. Further, it says that the guidance reemphasizes the importance of cash flow projections, diversified funding sources, stress testing, a cushion of liquid assets, and a formal, well-developed contingency funding plan, also known as CFP, as primary tools for measuring and managing liquidity risk. The definition of ALM is strategic management tools that manage interest rate risk and liquidity risk faced by all financial institutions. Its role involves disclosing the sensitivity of net income and net economic value of the balance sheet to management, the ALCO committee, as well as the board of directors. It facilitates active management of the interest rate risk to meet financial objectives while maintaining defined risk limits. And finally, ALM provides a tool to strategically think forward, looking on the balance sheet scenarios as well as market forces. The goals of ALM are simple. The first is to provide the utmost amount of financial transparency. The second is to optimize actual risk-taking with the appetite of the institution at hand. This would involve achieving a desired level of financial performance while maintaining an acceptable risk profile. There is, of course, inherent and interrelated risks in the marketplace. The credit, liquidity, and interest rate and strategic risks are all interrelated and have dependencies that transcend one another. The importance of interest rate risk management involves the mismatch between assets and liabilities which create interest rate risk exposure and NEV sensitivity. Adjusting duration of assets and liabilities change sensitivities, and the four ways that a manager such as yourselves can address the IRR on balance sheets would be the investment portfolio of assets, the internal funding for liabilities, external funding also for liabilities, and the product types through assets and liabilities. It also involves anticipating future earnings with rate changes. It provides ability to maintain safety, soundness, and profitability. Understanding different rate environments also improves your strategic decision making. The components of interest rate risk are comprised of repricing, the basis risk, yield curve risk, followed by option risk. And the ways to measure interest rate risk involve several different types of reports. One would be the balance sheet analysis, followed by, in complexity, the gap analysis, which then falls into income simulation, followed by net economic value. And in addition, there are other reports such as liquidity needs and sources of funds, yield and cost reporting, as well as spread analysis. The balance sheet analysis involves the review of the basic data and considers the relative size of each asset and liability category, its typical maturities, and unique repricing characteristics. On the other hand, the gap management report includes actions taken to measure and match within reason rate-sensitive assets and rate-sensitive liabilities. Rate-sensitive assets and liabilities are any interest-bearing instrument that can be repriced to a market rate in a given time frame. This slide is a depiction of how a gap report might be demonstrated. For instance, in the first monthly time bucket, we see that there is a gap of a negative 1,000 between the rate-sensitive assets and liabilities. In 6 months, we see that they're on par and offset each other equally. Then on 12 months and afterwards, we see that there is a positive gap of 3,000. This report is very critical for managing cash flows over the horizon, so that there are no unnecessary surprises. One example of a gap report is demonstrated on this slide. It comes from our PALM software, which is a ALM-based solution for most financial institutions such as credit unions and banks. And as you can see here, there is not only a period mismatch, but also one that takes care of the cumulative mismatch as well. And it has a horizon of over 20 years. In each of these time buckets, we can segment each of the cash flows to ensure that we have as optimized as possible the balance sheet. There are 3 possible gap positions. There's negative, positive, and matched. A negative gap is created when more rate-sensitive liabilities are repriced than the rate-sensitive assets in a given time period. In this case, if assets are less than liabilities and the rates climb as we expect in the near future, the net interest income and the net economic value should decline. Whereas in a positive gap scenario, when the rates increase, we'll see that the NII and NEV will climb. And even when a match occurs, we'll see that there is no change between the NII and NEV in the various scenarios. The third type of report is the income simulation analysis report. Its basic function is to create an income simulation model. Some regulators prefer to have it as much as 5 years. However, what we do find is that after the first 2 years, the model may not be as meaningful since there can be drastic changes afterwards in assumptions. So it is definitely an improvement over the gap report. It plots all estimated cash flows, captures actual timing cash flows, and can handle prepayment volatility and address optionality. The models change for the net interest income and net income, and it begins with the current financial position and adds the assumptions as time goes on. Probably the most important element and feature of this income simulation report is its shocks. And they're more subjective in that they include solid assumptions that are key to producing meaningful results. On this slide, we can see that we begin with a flat or base case rate, which is today's current rate. And then we apply parallel shocks with up and down 100 basis point increments. until we've reached the outer elements of up and down 300. This is a very basic simulation that is used for income projection. Again, this particular report comes from the PALM system and will also show with red flags or other types of thresholds whether the organization has actually met, exceeded, or fell behind certain expectations by depicting the okay or failure statements on the bottom. All of the major ratios are provided here on this report, such as the net change in NII and also how it compares with ALCO guideline status reports. It also reports on the spread. Other types of charts and graphs can also act as stepping stones from the previous report. We have here net interest income, the net interest margin, the percent change, and return on assets. And these would be for each of the different scenarios and base case for the different shocks. One of the final reports that we'll go through today is the Net Economic Value Analysis Report. The NEV takes a longer-term, more comprehensive view of financial risk since it includes cash flows on a financial instruments over their entire lives. It provides the best picture of long-term IRR and is superior to cost accounting information. It captures interest and principal cash flows and option risk. It is imperative that the ALM model and assumptions are relevant and reflective of the financial institution. This is a sample report that came from PALMS, and it also breaks it down into the different base case and shock scenarios. On the far left-hand side, we see a column for book value. This is a similar report, but for liabilities. And on the bottom, as you will see, we can ascertain whether this financial institution met or exceeded, or in a couple cases, failed to exceed ALCO guideline statuses. The NEV charts and graphs can be depicted in light of these particular charts, both in change in value and also NEV ratio analysis. These offer very optical, helpful tools in order to spot any trends or patterns in the marketplace or for the financial institution, and can act very well as in terms of an indicator of potential troubles. The liquidity analysis report is a report that has been around for quite some time. However, it's received a bit of popularity in recent years due to the liquidity crisis. We can see here that on our PALMS report, it offers liquidity ratios as well as dependency ratios. It can also help check in with the solvency of an organization and its health. And perhaps the most helpful of all of these reports is called the executive summary, which is broken into three major components: the liquidity summary, the first-year projected income at risk, followed by the projected value at risk, also known as net economic value. And as you can see here, in one quick elevator pitch slide, key management decisions can be made upon a snapshot of the health of the organization. So to summarize all the types of reports that PALMS currently offers, as well as that regulators usually demand in the marketplace, would be the executive summary, projected income at risk, the NEV report with sub-detail reports grouped and compared, the liquidity analysis, key ratios, gap report, historical performance analysis, followed by balance sheet composition, balance sheet supporting data, along with the assumptions that are almost indispensable for auditors in order to track down a paper trail of the supporting data underlying the reports. And all of these reports are typically accessible with easy-to-read graphical JPEGs and presentations.